Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive into
Mindfulness meditation.
mindfulness meditation and how it actually
changes
changes the brain, especially for those dealing with mental health challenges.
Yeah.
We've got a scientific review paper all about the neural mechanisms of mindfulness, especially as it's used clinically. And to add another layer, we've also got excerpts from a research article exploring how traditional contemplative science, think ancient practices from India and Tibet,
Right.
can actually inform and enhance modern neuroscience research.
What's fascinating here is we're not just looking at mindfulness as a relaxation technique,
Right.
but really getting into the nitty-gritty of how it impacts brain structure and function.
Yeah.
And what's even cooler is we're going to explore this through the lens of both modern science and these ancient traditions,
Yeah.
which is a pretty unique approach.
It's like we're bridging a gap between ancient wisdom and modern science.
Right.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's start with the basics.
Okay.
What exactly is mindfulness meditation? I feel like it's one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot.
For sure.
But its meaning can get a little fuzzy.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
At its core, mindfulness meditation is all about paying attention to the present moment with a non-judgmental attitude.
Okay.
It's about observing your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without getting swept away by them or labeling them as good or bad.
So it's not about emptying your mind
Not at all.
or trying to stop thinking altogether.
No, it's more about changing your relationship to your thoughts.
Okay.
Imagine you're sitting by a stream,
Okay.
watching leaves float by.
Okay.
You notice them, acknowledge them, but you don't jump in the stream and chase after them.
Right.
That's kind of like mindfulness.
Okay, that's a helpful visual.
Yeah.
And I know there are specific mindfulness programs out there like MBSR and MBCT.
Right.
What makes them different from just casually meditating on your own?
Great question. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, or MBCT, are structured programs specifically designed for clinical use.
Okay.
They've been rigorously studied and shown to be effective for a wide range of conditions,
Wow.
from anxiety and depression
Yeah.
to chronic pain and even heart disease.
And it's not just standalone programs, right? Mindfulness concepts are also integrated into other therapies like DBT and ACT.
Exactly. The applications are really vast
Wow.
and growing all the time as research continues, but regardless of the specific program or therapy,
Okay.
the core principles of mindfulness remain the same.
Right.
And within mindfulness meditation, there are two main techniques we should discuss.
Let's hear them.
Okay.
I'm ready to get into the specifics of how we actually practice mindfulness.
The first is called focused attention, or FA.
Okay.
It's all about directing your attention to a specific object, like your breath,
Right.
a mantra, or a physical sensation.
Right.
When your mind inevitably wanders, you gently guide your attention back to the object of focus.
So it's like training a muscle,
Yeah,
the muscle of attention in this case.
that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
The more you practice,
Right.
the stronger your ability to focus becomes.
Makes sense.
The second technique is called open monitoring, or OM.
Okay.
Here, you cultivate a broader awareness of whatever arises in your experience. Thoughts, feelings, sounds, sensations,
Okay.
without getting fixated on any one thing.
Yeah.
It's about observing with a sense of curiosity and acceptance.
This one sounds a bit trickier,
It can be.
like trying to pay attention to everything at once.
It can feel that way at first.
Yeah.
But the goal isn't to be perfectly aware of everything.
Okay.
It's more about cultivating a spacious awareness
Right.
that allows you to observe your inner world without judgment.
Okay, so both techniques involve paying attention to the present moment, but in slightly different ways. But how does this all connect to what's happening in the brain? This is where things start to get really interesting for me.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
to really understand how mindfulness works, its magic on the brain,
Okay.
we need to break it down into its key components.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Let's break it down.
The first component is present-centered awareness.
Okay.
This is all about anchoring your attention to the here and now, to your thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations in this very moment.
So instead of dwelling on the past or worrying about the future,
Right.
we're intentionally bringing ourselves back to the present moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And neuroscientifically, this ability to focus on the present involves a specific network in the brain called the salience network.
Okay, before we go any further,
Sure.
what exactly is the salience network?
Yeah.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
What does it do?
It's like The brain's air traffic control system.
Okay.
It helps us filter out distractions and focus on what's truly important in any given moment. Key areas within this network include the anterior insula and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or DACC.
So when we practice mindfulness and strengthen our present-centered awareness, are we actually strengthening this salience network?
That's exactly what the research suggests,
Boy.
and the implications of this are pretty significant.
I'm ready to hear about those implications.
Okay.
Tell me more.
Well, think about conditions like anxiety and ADHD, where attention regulation can be a major challenge.
Right.
Studies have shown that mindfulness training, especially MBCT,
Okay.
can actually improve attention regulation in people with generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD.
Wow.
They become more aware of their anxious thoughts and feelings
Yeah.
without getting swept away by them.
That's incredible.
Mm.
So it's not just about feeling calmer in the moment, but actually retraining the brain to respond differently to anxiety.
Right.
What's fascinating to me is that we can consciously influence these brain networks
Yeah.
through something as simple as paying attention.
Mm.
Okay, so we've covered present-centered awareness.
Right.
What's the next key component of mindfulness?
The next component is meta-awareness,
Okay.
which is the ability to observe your own mind at work.
Okay.
It's like having an inner observer
Right.
who can notice when your mind has wandered away from the present moment.
So it's like being aware of being aware.
It is.
That sounds pretty meta.
It is.
Yeah.
And this ability to observe your own thoughts and feelings without judgment
Right.
is linked to another important brain network called the default mode network, or DMN.
I've heard of the DMN.
Yeah.
It's the network that's active when our minds are kind of wandering, right?
Yeah.
Like when we're daydreaming or lost in thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The DMN is involved in self-referential thinking, reminiscing about the past, planning for the future,
Right.
and all those mental meanderings that our minds love to engage in.
And is that a bad thing?
Right?
I mean, isn't it normal for our minds to wander sometimes?
It's definitely normal.
Okay.
But here's the catch. Excessive activity in the DMN has been linked to negative thinking patterns that contribute to various mental health conditions,
Okay.
like depression,
Yeah.
anxiety, substance abuse, and eating disorders.
So it's not that mind wandering is inherently bad.
Right.
It's more about becoming aware of when it's happening and learning to manage it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where meta-awareness comes in.
Yeah.
By strengthening our ability to observe our thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in them,
Right.
we can gently redirect our attention back to the present moment,
Yeah.
breaking free from those unhelpful thought loops.
This is where I start to see how mindfulness can really make a difference in our daily lives.
Yeah.
It's like having a tool to manage those mental patterns
Mm-hmm.
that can sometimes lead us down a rabbit hole of worry or negativity.
It really is a powerful tool.
Oh.
And the research backs this up. There's
Yeah.
a fascinating study that explored the effects of MBCT on the DMN in people with bipolar disorder. They found that after mindfulness training, the activity and connectivity patterns in the DMN of these individuals started to resemble those of healthy controls.
Wow, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
So it's like mindfulness can help rebalance the brain's activity in a way that promotes mental well-being.
Right.
This is all starting to click for me now.
Good.
We've talked about present-centered awareness and meta-awareness.
Right.
What's the third key component of mindfulness?
The third component is non-reactive self-related processing.
Okay.
It's a bit of a mouthful,
Yeah.
but it basically means observing your thoughts and feelings with acceptance and curiosity without judgment.
Okay, that resonates with what we've been talking about so far.
Yeah.
Instead of getting all tangled up in our emotions or beating ourselves up for having certain thoughts,
Right.
we learn to just observe them
Exactly.
without getting swept away.
Mm-hmm.
But what does this look like on a neural level?
This process involves a complex interplay between the DMN, which we've already discussed,
Right.
and areas of the brain associated with self-reference,
Okay.
particularly the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and dorsomedial prefrontal cortex.
Gotcha.
Don't worry too much about the technical names.
Okay.
What's important is that these areas help us relate to ourselves and our experiences.
So it's like mindfulness is helping us create some distance between who we are and the thoughts and feelings that arise in our minds.
Exactly.
We can see them as mental events, not necessarily facts or reflections of our worth.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this can be incredibly helpful in reducing negative self-beliefs and promoting mental flexibility.
Right.
We learn to detach from those self-critical thoughts and create a more compassionate and accepting relationship with ourselves.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Good.
We're not just talking about relaxation or stress reduction.
Right.
Mindfulness is really about changing the way we relate to our inner world, which in turn impacts how we think, feel, and behave. Are there any studies that specifically support this idea of non-reactive self-related processing?
There's a study on GAD that showed some really interesting results.
Yeah.
After participants completed an 8-week MBSR program, the researchers observed increased connectivity between the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in planning and decision-making,
Right.
and the amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotions.
So it's like the mindfulness training helped people with GAD better regulate their emotional responses.
You got it.
Like they could observe their anxiety without it hijacking their whole system. Wow.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the neural mechanisms of mindfulness.
Right.
We're just starting to uncover the depth and complexity of how this practice impacts the brain.
And to think we've only explored mindfulness from a modern scientific perspective so far.
Right.
I'm excited to delve into the ancient wisdom of the Nalanda tradition.
Me too.
And see how it can add another layer to our understanding.
The Nalanda tradition, which originated in ancient India, offers a fascinating and comprehensive map of the nervous system that, while developed centuries ago, aligns remarkably well with modern neuroscience research.
Okay, I'm hooked.
Good.
What insights does the Nalanda tradition offer about how mindfulness works in the brain?
Well, it actually offers several intriguing predictions that can be tested using modern scientific methods.
Cool.
It's a beautiful example of how ancient wisdom and modern science can complement and enrich each other.
I can't wait to hear about these predictions.
Okay.
Let's dive in.
One of the most fascinating predictions is that different contemplative practices, things like mindfulness meditation, compassion practices, and what the Nalanda tradition calls integral practices.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, what are integral practices? I'm not familiar with that term.
Good question.
Yeah.
In the Nalanda tradition, integral practices encompass techniques that go beyond mindfulness and compassion.
Okay.
They often involve working with the breath imagery affirmations. And energy flows within the body.
Got it.
Yeah.
So how do these different practices, including integral practices, impact different levels of the nervous system?
Think of it like this.
Okay.
Mindfulness practices primarily impact the higher brain centers associated with attention and awareness.
Okay.
They help us cultivate present-centered awareness and meta-awareness, which we've already discussed.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Good.
What about compassion practices? Where do they fit into this picture?
Compassion practices, on the other hand, are predicted to engage more of the limbic system, which is involved in processing emotions and social connection.
So it's like different practices target different circuits in the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this brings us to integral practices, which are believed to work on the deeper structures of the brain, including the brainstem, which regulates fundamental physiological processes.
So we've got practices that target the thinking brain, the feeling brain, and the more primal instinctual parts of the brain. It's amazing to think that we can consciously influence these different levels of the nervous system through specific practices.
It is.
But how does this translate into real-world benefits? What does this mean for someone who's struggling with anxiety or depression, for example?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And we'll dive deeper into the specific applications of these practices in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But before we wrap up this segment,
Yeah.
I want to introduce another fascinating prediction from the Nalanda tradition,
Right.
one that challenges our current understanding of the nervous system.
Okay. I'm always up for a challenge.
Good. Lay it on me.
The Nalanda map suggests that there are actually 3 autonomic systems.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the fight-or-flight response of the sympathetic nervous system and the rest and digest mode of the parasympathetic nervous system. But a third autonomic system, what's that all about? This is where the Nalanda tradition really pushes the boundaries of our current understanding.
Okay.
They describe this third system as being associated with states of bliss,
Okay.
love, and interconnectedness.
Okay. That sounds pretty intriguing.
Yeah.
But is there any scientific evidence to support this idea of a third autonomic system?
It's a very new area of research.
Okay.
But there are some tantalizing hints that it might not be as far-fetched as it sounds.
Okay.
Think about the experience of awe, for example.
Like when you witness a breathtaking sunset or a vast starry sky?
Exactly.
Oh.
Those moments of awe often invoke a sense of wonder,
Yeah.
connectedness, and a kind of transcendent joy
Right.
that doesn't quite fit into the categories of fight or flight or rest and digest.
So maybe those experiences of awe are tapping into this third autonomic system.
It's a possibility that researchers are beginning to explore.
Wow.
And it could have profound implications for our understanding of well-being and human potential.
Yeah.
But we're just scratching the surface here.
Right.
There's so much more to uncover, and we'll delve deeper into this fascinating concept, along with the Nalanda tradition's other intriguing predictions in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm already on the edge of my seat. This is mind-blowing stuff.
It's a journey of discovery that I'm excited to continue with you.
We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of mindfulness, meditation, and the brain.
Okay.
Until then, keep those minds curious and those breaths flowing.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into mindfulness, meditation, and the brain.
It's great to be back. We left off with a pretty big cliffhanger.
Yes.
The idea of a third autonomic system.
Right.
Beyond the fight or flight and rest and digest that we're all familiar with.
That really piqued my curiosity. The Nalanda tradition associates this third system with states of bliss and love, which sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But I'm still wondering how that squares with what we know about the nervous system from a scientific perspective.
It's definitely a concept that challenges our current model, but there's emerging research that's starting to paint a more nuanced picture of the autonomic nervous system.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about this research.
Well, one area of study that's particularly relevant is the field of psychophysiology,
Okay.
which looks at the relationship between psychological processes and physiological responses.
Right.
Researchers in this field are starting to recognize that the traditional view of the autonomic nervous system
Yeah.
as a simple on-off switch
Right.
between sympathetic and parasympathetic activation
Yeah.
might be overly simplistic.
So it's not just about going from fight or flight to rest and digest,
Right.
but something more complex is going on.
Exactly. There's a growing body of evidence suggesting that the autonomic nervous system is capable of much more nuanced and flexible responses, depending on the specific situation and the individual's internal state.
That makes sense. We're not robots, after all. Our nervous systems are constantly adapting and responding to a wide range of internal and external cues.
Precisely. And this is where the idea of a third autonomic system starts to become really interesting. What if, instead of just two opposing forces,
Right.
there's actually a third system
Yeah.
that allows for a more integrated and harmonious state, one that goes beyond the extremes of fight or flight and rest and digest?
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could fit into a broader understanding of the nervous system. But what kind of evidence is there to support this idea? What does this third system actually look like in the brain and body?
That's the million-dollar question. It's still early days in this area of research, but some scientists believe that the vagus nerve, which we discussed earlier, might play a key role in this third autonomic system.
Right, the vagus nerve is like a central communication pathway between the brain and the body, influencing everything from heart rate and digestion to inflammation and mood.
And what's fascinating is that recent research has shown that stimulating the vagus nerve through techniques like slow, deep breathing can actually shift the balance of the autonomic nervous system away from the sympathetic fight or flight response and towards a more relaxed and balanced state.
So by consciously working with our breath, we might be able to tap into this third autonomic system that the Nalanda tradition describes, the one associated with bliss and love.
It's a very compelling hypothesis and one that deserves further investigation. And it ties in beautifully with another prediction from the Nalanda map, the idea that conscious breathing practices can unlock profound levels of self-regulation
Right.
by integrating different levels of the nervous system.
This is remind me of what we discussed earlier about how different contemplative practices impact different levels of the nervous system. Mindfulness practices primarily work on the higher brain centers. Compassion practices engage the limbic system, and integral practices, which often involve working with the breath,
Exactly.
influence deeper structures like the brainstem.
And the breath is unique in its ability to bridge these different levels of the nervous system. By consciously regulating our breath,
Yeah.
we can influence not only our mental and emotional states, but also our physiological processes, creating a more harmonious state of being.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. It's like the breath is a master key that can unlock greater balance and integration within the entire system.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the exciting thing is that we don't need fancy equipment or expensive therapies to access this power. The breath is always with us, and we can learn to harness its potential through simple yet profound practices.
This is really resonating with me. It feels empowering to know that we have this innate capacity to influence our own well-being through something as fundamental as the breath.
It is empowering, isn't it? And it speaks to the wisdom of these ancient traditions that have recognized the importance of the breath for centuries.
Okay, ready to move on to the next prediction from the Nalanda tradition.
Yeah.
What else does this ancient map have to tell us about the nervous system and how we can work with it?
Another prediction that stands out is the idea that there's a close relationship between the nervous system and the subtle energy channels described in yogic traditions. These channels, known as nadis, are believed to carry prana or vital life force energy throughout the body.
I've heard about prana and nadis in the context of yoga and Ayurveda, but I've always been a little skeptical. It all sounds a bit esoteric and mystical.
I understand your skepticism. It's natural to question things that fall outside of our conventional understanding. But what's interesting is that some researchers are starting to explore whether there might be a scientific basis for these ancient concepts.
Really? How are they approaching this?
One avenue of research is looking at the fascial system, which is a network of connective tissue that surrounds and supports all the muscles, organs, and other structures in the body.
I'm familiar with fascia from a fitness perspective, but I'm not sure how it relates to prana or nadis.
Well, some scientists believe that the fascial system might actually be a physical substrate for the subtle energy channels described in yogic traditions.
So the nadis might not be literal tubes or channels,
Right.
right? But rather pathways of energy flow within the fascial network.
That's one possible interpretation. And what's intriguing is that the fascial system has been shown to play a role in proprioception, which is our sense of body awareness and spatial orientation.
And proprioception is also something that's cultivated through mindfulness and yoga practices, right?
Exactly. So it's possible that by working with the body through practices like yoga and mindfulness, we're actually influencing the flow of energy within the fascial system, which in turn impacts our nervous system and overall well-being.
Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Hmm.
This is so much more than just stretching and breathing. It's like we're tapping into a whole new level of understanding about the interconnectedness of our body, mind, and energy.
And that's just the beginning. The Nalanda tradition offers a wealth of insights into the workings of the nervous system and the potential for human transformation through contemplative practices. But we've covered a lot of ground already, and I want to make sure we have time to discuss some specific studies that highlight the real-world benefits of mindfulness meditation.
I'm eager to hear about those studies. Let's shift gears and dive into the research. Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm really excited for this last part. We've explored the science of mindfulness, gotten a taste of ancient wisdom, and now it's time to see how this all plays out in real life.
It's one thing to talk about brain networks and subtle energy channels, but ultimately what matters is how these practices actually impact people's lives.
Exactly. So let's dive into some specific studies that really highlight the tangible benefits of mindfulness meditation. What have researchers discovered about how mindfulness can help with conditions like anxiety and depression?
There's a groundbreaking study that comes to mind, one that really solidified mindfulness as a powerful tool for managing anxiety. It involved participants with generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD, who underwent an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program.
MBSR. That's one of the gold standard mindfulness programs, right? The one designed to help people cope with stress and difficult emotions.
That's the one. And what makes this study so remarkable is that the researchers used fMRI to look at changes in brain activity before and after the program.
So they could actually see how mindfulness was changing the physical structure and function of the brain.
Precisely. And the results were truly fascinating. They found that MBSR led to a decrease in the volume of the amygdala, which is the brain region responsible for processing fear and other strong emotions.
So mindfulness was actually shrinking the fear center of the brain.
In a way, yes. And it wasn't just about size. They also observed changes in the activity patterns of the amygdala, suggesting that it was becoming less reactive to threats and stressors.
That's incredible. So it's like mindfulness is helping to rewire the brain's threat detection system, making it less likely to go into overdrive when faced with challenging situations.
That's a great way to put it. And these changes in brain structure and function were correlated with a significant reduction in anxiety symptoms.
So not only were the participants' brains changing, but they were also feeling less anxious in their daily lives. That's what I call real-world impact.
Absolutely. And it's not just anxiety. Similar studies have shown that mindfulness can also have a profound impact on depression. There's one study in particular that I find really inspiring. It involved individuals with major depressive disorder who participated in an 8-week mindfulness-based cognitive therapy program.
MBCT, that's the program specifically designed for depression, right?
That's right. And the researchers found that MBCT was just as effective as antidepressants in preventing relapse.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
So mindfulness is not just a complementary practice. It can be a primary treatment option for depression on par with medication.
That's what this research suggests. And what's even more remarkable is that mindfulness seems to work in a completely different way than antidepressants.
I'm really curious about that. How does mindfulness address depression differently than medication?
Well, antidepressants typically target neurotransmitters in the brain, specifically serotonin and norepinephrine, which are involved in mood regulation. Mindfulness, on the other hand, seems to work by changing the way we relate to our thoughts and feelings.
So instead of just trying to boost happy chemicals in the brain, mindfulness is teaching us to become more aware of our internal experience and respond to it in a more skillful way.
Exactly. And this can be incredibly empowering for people struggling with depression. It gives them a sense of agency and control over their own mental health rather than relying solely on medication.
I love that. It's like mindfulness is giving people the tools to become their own therapists in a way.
That's a great analogy. And it's not just about managing symptoms. Mindfulness can also enhance cognitive function and promote well-being in healthy individuals.
Yes, I was just thinking about that. I notice that when I'm meditating regularly, I feel more focused, creative, and resilient in the face of challenges.
And those subjective experiences are now being backed up by scientific research. There's a fascinating study that looked at the effects of mindfulness on attention and working memory in a group of college students.
College students, definitely a population that could benefit from some extra focus and attention.
Right. And what's amazing is that they found significant improvements in both attention and working memory after just 30 days of practicing mindfulness for 10 minutes a day.
10 minutes a day. That's totally doable, even for the busiest of college students. It really highlights how accessible and impactful this practice can be.
And it's not just college students. Studies have shown similar benefits in older adults, demonstrating that mindfulness can help maintain cognitive function as we age.
So it's never too late to start reaping the benefits of mindfulness.
Exactly. And it's not just about cognitive function. Mindfulness has also been shown to boost creativity, enhance emotional intelligence, and improve relationships.
This is all so inspiring. It feels like mindfulness is this incredible gift that we can give ourselves, one that keeps on giving.
It truly is, and the research is only just beginning to scratch the surface of its potential. As we continue to explore the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern science, I have no doubt that we'll uncover even more remarkable benefits of mindfulness.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into mindfulness meditation and the brain. And I feel like we've only just begun to explore this vast and fascinating landscape.
It's a journey of discovery that can last a lifetime, and I encourage everyone listening to embark on their own exploration of mindfulness.
What a beautiful way to end this deep dive. It's a reminder that the power to transform our minds and lives lies within each of us. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey, and until next time, keep diving deep into the mysteries of the mind and the power of human potential.